Let's talk Chicago. Here for Jon Zaghloul, and we are back and ready for today's special guest. He's an NFL Rules Analyst for Fox Sports and the VP of officiating for the XFL. Please welcome Dean Blandino to the program. Dean, it's great to have you on. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
What do you make of NFL officiating this past year, first off?
You know, NFL officiating, you look at it from year to year, and it doesn't change drastically in terms of performance. I think what changes, and it's changed more drastically in recent years, is the scrutiny, the attention, the expectation as technology continues to get better, and we continue to improve the way that we can watch the game and analyze the game. We got to remember the officials are still human beings, and they aren't evolving as quickly as the technology is. So I think the officiating was good. There's always going to be ups and downs. But I think the league took some good steps to try to use technology to help the on-field officials and make the game, just make the overall game better, more efficient, more accurate. And I think that's something the league, has to continue to look at.
What technology specifically are you referring to?
Yeah, so last year what the league did is they allowed for the replay officials and the group in New York to provide the on-field officials with information in real time. So they were able to use video and provide information on objective aspects of a play, the ball hitting the ground, a knee down, the foot touching out of bounds, things like that. So rather than go through a full-blown review, they were able to correct some things more efficiently and expedite that process. So I think that was a good step in the right direction. It wasn't without its growing pains, and there was definitely some things where it created some confusion. But I think that's the type of thing that the league is going to continue to look at and help the officials. And also, just as we think about game time and flow of game, eliminate some of the unnecessary stoppages.
How do you think the flow of the game is right now, and could it improve?
I think it's pretty good. You always look at the overall game length, and it's down 3 hours and 3 minutes and change, which is down from previous years. But within that 3 hours and 3 minutes, how is that game flowing? Are how many stoppages for replay reviews, penalty administration, the things that you can control, right? You can't control how many incomplete passes there are. There are an expected number of television timeouts and things like that. So those are built in. But, I think the game is in a good place, and you want to try to keep it within that 3 hour window. But again, fans don't care if a game is 3 hours or 3 hours and 20 minutes. If it's a good game, if it's exciting, if it has good flow. So I think that's kind of the goal, is to try to, maintain that good flow, maintain competitive balance, and the rest will take care of itself.
What's the one thing that made officials so much better last year and in the years to come as well? Is there one specific thing that's made them much better?
I don't think it's one thing. I think it's just overall training and development. You have to continue. My time at the NFL, that was a constant challenge in terms of you have 17 different officiating crews, 7 officials, each at an individual position. So you might have 17 different referees. You might have 34 different line of scrimmage officials. You might have 51 different deep officials, and trying to get those officials to call the game consistently. So when there's a call made in Seattle, it's under the same parameters and the same standard as the call that's made in Chicago. And I think that's the biggest challenge. I think that's just the overall picture in terms of using technology, teaching. You think about when I first started in 1994, the internet wasn't a big thing. You couldn't just share video electronically. You had to send that video via FedEx or via, regular mail, and you were waiting days to get a look at that video. Now the access to video and Zoom sessions and virtual training sessions, it's gone so far above and beyond what we used to have, and that makes everyone better.
Has the internet made officials over-scrutinized?
Absolutely. No question. When I first started the internet, again, it wasn't as big, and you might make a mistake. There might be a mistake in a game, and everyone moved on. And it was a non-issue, not just the next day, but maybe, an hour or two later. Now with the access that everyone has, the platform, media is such a nebulous term today, because everyone with an internet connection and a platform can be considered media. And so the scrutiny, no question, the internet has changed how people view officials, the access, and it's made it, the environment more pressurized. But that's what officials expect when they get to that, the highest level. They understand that and they know that going in.
What's the most pressure you faced when you worked for the NFL?
The most pressure I faced, for me, it wasn't something. I enjoyed game day. I enjoyed being in the moment and being able to look at a call and analyze it, especially when we were part of replay decisions. I was a replay official for several years. So I really enjoyed that and didn't feel that as pressure. More pressure that I felt is when there was no control. When I was, in the command center watching the game and really wasn't able to be a part of that decision-making process and watching a flag being thrown and then hoping as the replay comes up that flag, that call is correct. So, that's you feel that type of pressure because you don't want games to be decided by officiating. You want the officials to be a non-issue, to be a non-factor. That's not always the case. It's just the way it is. But I always enjoyed game day and I loved being a part of that.
Have you dealt with that when you worked for the NFL, officiating, potentially deciding a game? How difficult was that to handle?
No question. I mean, it's very rare where one call decides a game, right? Because there's so much that goes into 155 plays on average, and every play there's something happens and then that has a kind of a ripple effect. So it's rare in my experience where one call decided the outcome of the game. But, there have been instances where that call, changed the outcome of the game. If you think of the Saints and the Rams and the NFC Championship game and the missed pass interference call, that's obviously a big call and probably decided who went to the Super Bowl. I go back to pre-replay and the Seahawks and Jets in 1997 with a Vinny Testaverde sneak up the middle on fourth down, ruled a touchdown, game-winning touchdown, and he was clearly short. So there are going to be calls like that. In my time, I don't think there's one that you could say it absolutely decided the game, but it definitely had a big impact on the game. I think back to, there was an illegal bat in Detroit, Seattle in the end zone after a Calvin Johnson fumble that wasn't called near the end of the game. That was a big call. And there have been others, but it's, that's just part of it. You got to deal with it. You have to be transparent. If the officials made a mistake or I made a mistake from the command center, you've got to admit that and move on, because if you don't, then it's just going to kind of linger.
What do you think about the Bears game this past year, Monday Night Football, the James Daniels phantom illegal block? How did you feel about it when you saw that play?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I didn't think it was a foul. The Bears were involved in a couple. You had the taunting call against the Steelers. And those are tough because they're judgment calls and it's just, the official in the moment made the call, and you can live with that. You don't want that to happen very often, but we got to remember in the officials get one look at it in real time, and then we get to analyze it and break it down from several different angles in slow motion. So, officials are going to miss calls, and I think coaches and players understand that. I've had two separate coaches tell me the same thing in separate conversations. Jim Caldwell and Bill Belichick both told me, look, there are three groups that decide games: the coaches, the officials, and the players. He said, coaches make the most mistakes, players make the next most, and officials make the fewest. But they do make mistakes, and it happens, and it's just part of the human element of the game.
What could we expect moving forward for the NFL when it comes to rules? Any changes or anything on the docket for improving the game?
Yeah, well, this year, made a couple of changes, added the overtime now and postseason as a result of the Chiefs-Bills game. Both teams will get an opportunity to possess the football, even if the team that first wins the toss scores a touchdown on the opening drive. So I think they'll continue to look at overtime. Whenever you're changing rules, you look at player safety first. And I think we've heard some things about maybe the punt return and a higher rate of injury during punts. So there might be some tweaks to that. I think they'll continue to utilize technology to help make the game better and safer and officiated correctly. But I think the game is in a good place. You see that from, there wasn't, 10 or 15 rule changes this offseason. There were 2 or 3. That's a good thing, right? That means the game is in a good place, because whenever you change a bunch of rules, everyone has to learn. They either have to unlearn something and learn something brand new. They've got to kind of change their behavior. Officials, coaches, players, everybody's got to kind of recalibrate. So I think that's a good thing in terms of not a lot of changes going forward.
Do you like changing rules based on one team's complaint? Like, for example, the overtime rule or the pass interference rule a few years ago?
No, I don't. I don't think that is a and history has borne that out. When you change a rule for one isolated situation, that tends to not be the best reason. And you've got to vet that out. I remember Bill Polian early on in my career going to competition committee meetings, and he always talked about unintended consequences. And Bill was great at that because you could have a conversation and be talking about, and everybody could be in agreement. And then Bill would point something out. What about this? What about that? And where it may seem cumbersome, it's necessary because you've got to think about anything that possibly could result from this rule change. We have a good intention. We want to change this thing that didn't happen. Maybe it wasn't fair. And we want to make that more equitable, but you've got to think about, okay, by changing this rule for this one situation, do we create 5, 10, 15 other situations where we're creating problems? I think we saw that with the pass interference rule from 2019, where we never really could find a clear standard, and it just seemed to be all over the place. So I don't agree with changing it for just one play. I know over time there was a lot of debate. And there were some numbers, especially from the regular season and the postseason, where the team that won the toss was winning it a higher percentage of times. So we'll see how that plays out. But I've always, in my experience, changing a rule for one play has never been a good idea.
Dean Blandino here on Sports Talk Chicago. Dean, you're now at the XFL again. Tell me about how that came up and what to expect from there.
Yeah, excited about the XFL. Obviously had the relationship from 2020, which ended prematurely, and really it was just unfortunate with the pandemic and not something anybody could have really anticipated or controlled, and just excited to be a part of it again. It was such a great experience to be a part of something new and build it from scratch, and now to be a part of it with new partners and Redbird Capital and Danny Garcia and Dwayne Johnson and some of the other folks, that the team that they've put together. It's tremendous, and really excited about 2023 and beyond, and what spring football and what the league can do.
So what are the main differences between XFL rules and NFL rules?
Yeah, so XFL, the foundation for XFL is NFL rules, but there are some changes, right? There's XFL specific rules, the kickoff being one of the big ones, where the kickoff is much different. Same kickoff that we had in 2020, where you have, the kicking team and the return team within 5 yards of one another. And the goal was to kind of eliminate some of those high speed collisions that were happening on more of a traditional alignment. You're allowed, overtime's different in the XFL. It's an alternating tries from the 5 yard line. You're allowed to throw two forward passes from behind the line of scrimmage during the same down. There's a 3-point try in the XFL from the 10 yard line, different from the NFL. So for the most part, it's NFL rules, professional football rules, with some tweaks. And those are the major ones that I just mentioned.
Do you see any of those at one point coming to the NFL?
Yeah, I don't know. I know they've discussed it. Certainly the kickoff, that's been something the league has looked at for many years. Higher rate of injuries during the kick return. They've made a lot of changes to that play to try to make it safer. And again, if the injury data in 2022 or beyond starts to compel the competition committee to look at alternates for the kickoff or different alignments, then I think they'll look at that, because small sample size in 2020, but it did kind of in the 5 weeks, we didn't see those high speed collisions. We didn't have any major head or neck injuries on the kickoff, and we did keep the return in the game. Over 90% of returns, kickoffs were returned, compared to 36-37% in the NFL. So I think that's something they'll look at. Certainly the transparency on the replay side and being able to see and hear what's happening during those decisions. I think that's something the NFL will continue to explore, and because anytime you can kind of pull that curtain back and allow fans an inside look, I think that eliminates some of the concerns, some of the conspiracy theories, some of the things you hear from fans about why a call was made. So I think those are things the league will look at.
What do you expect out of the XFL come next year?
I think it's going to be just building on the foundation from 2020. The football is going to be great. I think we're going to see some really great innovations on the technology side, great coaches, great ownership. And I'm just excited. I'm excited about spring football and what's been happening with the USFL. And I think there's room for it. I think, there's a lot of players and coaches, and not just players and coaches, but people, athletic trainers, equipment managers, everyone that's a part of a professional football team and organization that's out there that would like an opportunity. And spring football is going to give them that opportunity.
Dean Blandino, still here on Sports Talk Chicago. Dean, a few more questions before we finish up. First off, the most controversial call that you've had to answer about is what?
The Dez Bryant play. Certainly, that's the one that will follow me around for as long as I'm around. And Cowboys fans will never, ever let me forget it. And that was one, it was extremely controversial. I knew it was controversial going in. As soon as Mike McCarthy threw the challenge flag, I told everyone in the room to just buckle up, because this was going to be, I said it in more colorful language, but it was going to be extremely controversial, because we knew the rule. We saw what happened. It was clear based on the rule that it was an incomplete pass, but that was a play where, you look at it, and I think reasonable people can look at it and say that should be a catch. Well, under the rule at the time, it wasn't. The rule has since been changed, but it's going to be a controversial play forever because of, it was a playoff game, divisional playoff, late in the game. Cowboys are behind, fourth down play, trying to get in the end zone, and they end up losing the game. So that's probably the most controversial one.
Do you ever disagree with officials in game when you're on Fox? And if that happens, how awkward is that?
Yeah, you do. It always plays out better when we come on and we give our analysis. And part of that is always going to be what we think the decision is going to be. And that's the decision. It flows better, right? But sometimes it's not always the case. And I'm going to look at it and I'm going to try to break it down. I try to approach it where I want to give the viewer an idea of what they're looking at. Here are the aspects they have to analyze. And then, what is the rule? If there's anything specific about the rule they need to know. And then, hey, look, if it were me making this decision, here's what I would do. And sometimes that's not always what they do. And I always try to, if I just flat out disagree, I might say that, try to do it in a respectful way. If it's close, then I'll try to kind of give the other perspective. Okay, here's why maybe they made this decision. Here's maybe they couldn't tell this aspect. And so, you try to just, it can be awkward, but you can eliminate some of that awkwardness by how you approach it, and just try to keep it as respectful as possible. And just, again, educate. That's the biggest thing.
Have you ever made a wrong call, either when you were with the NFL or with Fox?
Oh, yeah, sure. There were calls that I would always go back when I was with, as a replay official, or when I was in the command center, and always go back on Monday and look at the calls that were made and ask myself if I would make the same decision that I made on game day. And there were absolutely times where I felt like I'd love to have that one back. There was a play, and it involved the Bears and Lions. It was Golden Tate. It was ruled an interception on the field. Golden Tate, near the goal line, it was ruled an interception for the Bears, and it went to review, and we made it a catch for a touchdown. And that's one that absolutely should have stand. That's one that kind of stands out for me. But yeah, no one is, I make mistakes. I've made mistakes on the broadcast too. You try to limit those. And again, it's not so much about me giving my opinion, as long as I can educate and explain, here's the rule, here's what they're considering to make the decision. And maybe I don't agree with it, but as long as the fans understand, the viewers understand why they're making that decision.
What about the best call you've made? What would that be?
The best call. Well, I'll tell you the most memorable one, and there's a funny story to it. It was Super Bowl 42 with the Patriots and the Giants, right? So the Patriots are undefeated and on the verge of having the greatest season of all time and being considered the greatest team of all time, and the underdog Giants, and they're hanging in there. And it was, Eli Manning, nearly sacked. He throws the ball up to David Tyree, and he kind of catches it up against his helmet. And I know everybody remembers the play. And that was one where, we're in the replay booth, and obviously they're hurrying up to the line and you don't have a lot of time to make that decision, and you've got to look at it. And we quickly were able to tell that the ball didn't hit the ground, and it was a clean catch, because you don't want to stop the game unnecessarily, because that can impact the flow and can give a team a timeout where maybe the defense was tired or the offense could get a chance to regroup. So you want to try to not stop the game if you don't have to. So that was probably one that stands out. But even more so than that, my phone started, I had it on vibrate, but I had it near me, and my phone started going off right after that play. And it was my mom, and my mom knew I was at the Super Bowl and she knew I was working. And so I wasn't going to answer. And then she called back again. So I thought, oh my God, it's an emergency. Let me quickly pick it up. And I picked it up. I'm like, Mom, what's going on? What's happening? And she's like, did you see that catch? And I just said, okay, Mom, I got to go. and I hung up, and I said, I'll call you after the game. So it was, that was one that stands out.
Finally, before we finish up today, Dean, the funniest moment you've been a part of in the business is what?
One of the funniest moments, it was, Thanksgiving Day, I think it was 2015. It was the early game. The Lions were playing. Can't remember who they were playing. And we're in the command center. We always had, everybody, hey, you've got to work on Thanksgiving, but that's a day typically for families and food and gathering. So we just told everybody, hey, everybody that was working, bring your families. We'll cater in some food, and we'll just make it a family day. We'll work, but we'll try to incorporate a little bit of family. And it was really a great time. And but unbeknownst to me, we have stations set up, and where the Lions game was set up with all the monitors and all the replay equipment, there was a kind of an electrical circuit, and someone had plugged a microwave into that circuit to heat up some stuffing. And when they turned the microwave on, the whole station shut down about 3 minutes into the game. So we were trying to heat up some stuffing, and we shut down. Thankfully, there was no reviews, no challenges during. We got it back up. We had a backup system that we could quickly change to. It only took about 30 seconds, but that was one where, I was thinking, hey, what the announcement would have been that replay is inoperable because they were trying to heat up some stuffing in the command center. So that's one that always makes me laugh when I think about it.
Well, Dean, thank you so much for joining me. A pleasure to have you on. Best wishes, of course, for the NFL and the XFL, and looking forward to the next time we chat as well.
Thanks for having me.